Recently, I've been getting a lot of questions about my editing process, especially when it comes to portrait photos. So today I'm going to be taking you guys through my entire process in Lightroom here of how I would edit a gallery of portrait images. So recently I did a photo shoot in the studio with my friend Maya. I had a very talented crew with me, a makeup artist and a stylist. We came together to create this look. And overall, I was super happy with the images that I was able to take. And I've picked 6 of my absolute favorite images here that I'm going to edit for you guys and show you guys exactly how I get from start to finish with my edits. So because I know some of you guys are going to ask straight away, the computer that I'm using is a MacBook M1 Max, I believe it is, from way back in 2021. And this Mac has been great. I just haven't really seen a need to upgrade yet. And then I'm also editing in Lightroom Classic. So before we get started, you guys probably already know I actually use a custom Lightroom profile to edit my photos. And that is like the starting point, the base of all of my edits. Now I could show you guys how to edit photos from scratch, but this is my realistic process when it comes to editing photos, and that's what I use. It's the reason that I can get a really consistent and unique look across all of my photos, and it's something that I've worked really hard on over the years, and I'm really happy with it. I did previously use presets, so I've still got them over here in the left hand panel, and I still do use these from time to time. They're really great. However, I was able to use some external tools to get even closer to exactly where I wanted to be. And the great thing about my profile is that it also works across all camera brands. So Canon files here, you guys know I also shoot Fuji, I also have a Sony camera, I have a Ricoh GR, and it's really great because I get a consistent look across all of those cameras. Now, of course, before we jump in, I am shooting RAW as well, and these profiles will only work with RAW files. So if you are shooting JPEG, unfortunately, you won't have access to the profiles if you only have JPEGs imported to your catalog. So let's get started with the first image. I have 4 different variations of the profile here. We've got a standard one, which is the profile that I'm going to be using like 99% of the time. I also have a soft one here that has a little bit softer contrast. So this is great sometimes when you just want a little bit more of a subdued look. Then we have a slightly more saturated version of the standard, and then a warm version. So this one just pushes a little bit more yellow, takes away a little bit more of that blue cast in the photo. So that's also one I'll use from time to time. But for this shoot, we're gonna go with the standard, and I'm actually just going to warm the photo up a little bit with the temperature. And then I'm thinking that the tint is pretty much perfect where it is. I'm not gonna change that at all. Now I do like my photos to be on the brighter side a little bit, so I'm gonna bring the exposure up just a touch, and then I'm going to use the highlights here to pull back a little bit of detail just in that backdrop there, and then also the same with the whites. And then I might bring the black down just a little bit, just to add a little bit more contrast there. So next up, I'm going to do some minor edits to the tone curve. So I'm thinking of just bringing the shadow areas down a little bit, just to introduce a little bit more contrast into the image. And this is just going to be like very slight adjustments here. Just bring a little bit more contrast, and then I might just roll the highlight off a little bit. So that's before, and then after, it's super subtle. Now when it comes to saturation, I actually don't usually use the vibrance and saturation sliders. I actually come all the way down to this calibration tab, and then I move the saturation of each RGB channel independently. So sometimes I'll just raise the red saturation up. Sometimes I'll do a combination of all 3, and I'd kind of just experiment with different combinations of the RGB channels in order to bring a little bit of extra saturation into the image. So I'm just going to reset all these back to default here, and then I'm going to add a little bit of grain to my image since I like that kind of vintage, little bit more gritty kind of look. So for this, I'll just simply zoom in here so I can get a good idea of what's going on. And I'm just going to bring in maybe like 20 or 15 level grain here. And then I'm going to bring the size down a little bit, probably around 11 or 12. And then I'm actually going to increase the roughness a little bit more. So it just like kind of brings like more of like a sharp kind of gritty sort of grain to the image. So I'll show you guys the before, that's before, and that's after. It is, of course, again, very subtle. But if you look at Portrait 400 or even 800 speed films in medium format, the grain is quite fine, and it's only really noticeable when you start really zooming in on the image. So that's the look that I like. Now, in terms of crop, this might be the last thing I do, is just like to quickly refine the crop of the image. Now, I've sort of cropped off the top of her head, as you can see, because for this image, I really want the outfit to kind of be the main event. And so if I sort of cropped it with a little bit more headroom, then we would sort of miss the bottom of the dress and sort of this detail here in this like belt. So I've just cropped off the top of her head. I might give it a little bit more headroom here, just so we're including the bottom of this piece of fabric here. And for me, that looks really great. I'm super happy with that. There's one last thing that I might do, which is just to quickly clean up some of the details of the image. So it's looking really good, but I noticed that Maya did have like a little bit of a bruise on her leg here. So this is a good idea just to like quickly clean these kinds of things up. I know some people don't. I personally prefer to do a little bit of like cleaning up on the image. And so for this, I'm just using the remove tool, and I believe this is the generative AI remove, which works really, really well. I've had some great results with the generative AI. And then also with just adding that layer of grain over the top, it really helps to like mask the edges of where you've replaced certain elements in the photo. So that's pretty much it there. I'm super happy with the job that did. Details look great. Again, I'm not scrutinizing too heavily. I could go in and remove some of these flyaways, like little extra hair and stuff like that, but I'm pretty much happy with this photo. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to copy this. So I'm going to check all of the options here now that I've pressed Command C to copy. And then I'm going to uncheck remove. Also going to uncheck the masking. I'm also going to uncheck white balance and exposure, because those are parameters that I want to adjust for each and every single photo. I'm going to hit copy, and then I'm just going to copy this over to the next image here. And straight away, oh, actually, I accidentally copied the crop, didn't I? Yeah, so we actually want to uncheck crop as well, because we don't want the same crop for every photo. We want it to customize it. And so I'm actually going to adjust the crop back down. I think it was somewhere around here, just so that we're getting the bottom of the shoe here. And straight away, I noticed that this photo is a little bit too dark. So we're going to go in and just adjust the exposure. Another thing that I really like to do as well is to just bring in my first photo and just to kind of like match the exposure between the two, so that when you're like flicking through the photos, you're not seeing a massive difference, both in white balance and also in your overall exposure. And just looking here, I think I might need to warm this one up a little bit. Yep, that looks great. Cool, so I'm going to go back to our single image view here. And this is looking great. I actually love the result here. Again, I'm just going to remove some distracting elements. So there is a little mark on the floor here. It's just the nature of shooting with like a clean white cyclorama backdrop. You're gonna have some black marks on the ground. It's probably my fault. I probably stood somewhere. Cool, so that's done. And I'm actually loving this photo, so we can move on to the next one by just copying those settings. Moving over, this is probably my favorite photo from the shoot. I just love how, you know, the details on this outfit create this sort of leading line, and I love the wide angle. So this is shot at 35mm. It's just created this really interesting look with the shoe in the foreground. Again, it is a little bit too dark, so I'm just gonna bring up my reference once again and just make sure that like we're in the similar level of brightness, and then also with our warmth. And I would be adjusting the tint as well, but the tint's pretty much perfect. Okay, cool. So I'm just checking again. We do have some marks on the floor, so I'm gonna get rid of those and then also clean up the skin. The cool thing about the generative remove tool is that you can select like multiple things at once, and it will just kind of batch them together. So I'll just go through and like do each one, and you don't have to like wait for it to continually update. Of course, the more you click around and the more you sort of remove from the photo, the longer the generative process is going to take. I'm also going to go in here because I noticed that there is a little bit of hair that's just kind of gone astray here at the top, and I'm going to try and remove this as well. This is maybe one of the weaknesses of generative fill. Sometimes it's not so good at cleaning up stray hairs, but let's have some faith in the software and see how it goes. Okay, so that didn't do too bad, to be honest. Let's just check the other areas of the photo and make sure everything's good. Just flipping through our options here. I think that looks better. So yeah, I will like try the options if I think that it doesn't look as good as it could look. All right, that is awesome. I'm super happy with that. So let's copy those settings to the next photo. And this is more of a wide angle, so I'm definitely going to be a little bit less, I guess, precious about retouching this one just because the details aren't super visible. I think this one might be a bit too bright, but then also the lighting is a little bit different for this photo, and I like the brightness, but I think we're losing some detail. So I might even go further with the highlights and the whites. Again, the cool thing about the profiles is that all of your sliders in Lightroom start at 0, so you can really go in and customize it further. Like with the preset, all of those sliders are already set, so you're pretty much just making adjustments to whatever's already been adjusted, but with the profile, it's kind of like a nice neutral starting base. And I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. And overall, this is looking good. Nothing really to clean up. So this is an easy one. Let's move on to the next photo. All right, so for this one, this is a completely different backdrop, different outfit, different lighting. It's all completely different. So I'm thinking of going maybe with a slightly different look for this one. I'm gonna bring down the crop just a little bit. And then for this, I'm actually gonna choose the warm profile. So this is the standard, and then that's the warm. So bring a little bit more of like that warmth into the skin tone. And I think that looks really cool. I think it helps to contrast against that blue backdrop. So you've got this really like warm versus the blue. It looks really cool. The tint for this one, just go towards magenta a little bit. And then I want to bring up the brightness, but then this is super bright because of the lighting. You can see in the side of her face. So I'm going to bring the highlight down and we're going to retain that detail. That looks so good already. I'm so happy with that. And then bring the whites down a little bit. And this is looking great. So I'm going to go ahead and add the grain again. So what were our grain settings here? I'm just going to pretty much copy this. 16, 12, 87. Okay. Awesome. And I'm just going to quickly do a skin retouch here because this is a little bit of a close-up. So the lighting on this one is a little bit less soft, so you're going to see a little bit more shadow on some of the imperfections of the skin. So I'm just going to go ahead and take care of those. There's not too much to do, to be honest. This is pretty easy, so we're going to let it do its thing. All right, that's looking fantastic. So this is the before and then the after. It's actually really nice. I might even kind of push this look a little further. So I'm going to come in here with the tone curve and I'm going to drag down on the shadows just to bring a little bit more contrast in. And then I'm going to raise the shadows up a little bit here. So I'm like raising the black point just to give it that more like kind of faded look. A little bit more of like an underexposed film sort of look. And then I'm actually liking a little bit more of like a flat look. So I'm going to pull these. See how like there's a peak in the histogram here? It means there's a lot of information in this area. And that's contributing towards a lot of the brightness in the highlights. So if you kind of pinpoint this area and like pull down, then you can actually bring a lot of the brightness down in that particular area of the frame. And you know what? I'm really happy with that. It's a really flat, neutral, just really pretty look overall. Has way less contrast than the original, which I love, just because of that lighting. Like, if you wanted to really lean into that contrasty lighting, you totally could, but I just love like flattening it out. I think it's just a really nice look. Right, so that's pretty much it. And the next one we have is another white backdrop photo, and I think I sort of reverted back to this sort of look when it comes to the lighting. So I'm actually gonna copy this grade again, and I'm going to pull it over here. Again, the profile doing most of the heavy lifting, so that's before the profile. And then after, you can also sort of dial in the opacity here. So if you just wanted like 50% of the profile to show through, you could also do that, which is really cool. Another reason why I love profiles over presets. Actually, I think you can do that with presets too. But yeah, figured I said that. So this is looking really great already. Again, do not forget to just cross-check your photos to make sure they're all consistent. A little bit more warmth, I think, on this one, and maybe a touch of tint, just a little bit towards magenta, possibly. Yep, I think that's looking good there. My editing is mostly just like really subtle changes that most people wouldn't notice. And I think I'm just going to brighten the image up overall once again. And this is looking so good. I'm really happy with this. What we can do as well, if we wanted to, this is kind of like a little bit of dead space here in the foreground, is just add like a linear gradient here to the image and just bring our exposure down. That's going to help to bring a little bit more detail, a little bit more interest into the foreground here with the dress. So that is the before and then the after. So I think that's pretty good. Again, I don't know. Sometimes I make these changes and then I come back and I think, why did I do that? So I always like to look at my photos again the next day with like a fresh pair of eyes. But I mean, to me, that looks pretty good. So that's the before and then the after. And then if we like look at these photos in sort of like a gallery all together, they're all looking really consistent. And this is pretty much the exact look that I was after. So I'm really happy. Before I forget as well, export settings, that is another important part of the process. So if I go select all my photos, go to export, and then I'm actually going to rename all my photos. So generally my naming scheme is like the name of the shoot or the name of the client and then the date, and then I'll have a sequence number. So it'll start at number 1 and then it will count up. That just helps me to archive my photos. Also, the photos are really searchable. In terms of the quality, I just choose JPEG at 100% quality, sRGB as the color space, and then I sometimes resize my photos to 3000 pixels. A lot of the time I'll do 2 separate exports. So one will be the full size JPEG and then the other one will be like a 3000, or if it's going to web, maybe like a 1500 pixel dimension resizing. It really all depends on the output and where the photos are going. For me personally, if they're going to my website, I'm looking at like 1500 pixels on the long side for the dimensions. And then you can also check sharpen for screen amount standard as well, and then hit export. So that's pretty much it for the tutorial. If you guys do like the look of these photos or other photos that I've shown on my channel, you can of course pick up my Lightroom profile linked down in the description below. It really helps to support me and to support my channel. If you guys have any other questions, anything that you think I might have missed, please leave them down in the comments section below. I appreciate you guys for sticking around once again, and I'll see you all in the next video.